Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond, Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from the Legal Action Group. That's the Access to Justice charity, now celebrating its 50th anniversary, 1972 to 2002. And this book is actually a new edition of the Court of Protection Handbook. It's a user's guide, 4th edition now, been written by a number of people, a very important book if you're involved in this area of practice, written by Alex Ruck, Keene, King's Counsel, Kate Edwards, Nicola Mackintosh, King's Counsel, and Sophy Miles. And there's an additional piece of work from Professor Anselm Eldersgill to assist. This is an important book because it's a difficult jurisdiction. I've actually practiced in it. It's not the easiest jurisdiction in the world at all, but I do think that this particular book is extremely helpful. Now, Elizabeth was the lead writer on this, and she's given it a title, I think, which is very good. We did have a long chat about the book. An indispensable handbook for practitioners in the Court of Protection, now in a new 4th edition for the post-COVID era. As I've said, Legal Action Group are a really important organisation for us as practitioners. They make our lives a lot easier with the work that they produce for us. And I'm very grateful because you will find these books in the courts. Now, this is the actual book itself. There's the front, it's a paperback. There's the spine, you can probably see the spine, and then the back. And there's a little shaded portion which actually gives you an indication of where the this is actually where the legislation itself is to be found. Appendix A, primary legislation, which of course has the two, well, actually the Mental Capacity Act itself, and of course the Human Rights Act as well. It's a heavy book, this one. It runs to nearly 1,000 pages. The index at the back is very useful. You should be able to find what you're looking for. It's by paragraph numbering. You can probably see the paragraph numbering there. If we go to the front of the book, you've then got that. There's the front page there, and it says there's a Court of Protection Handbook.com site which is mentioned there, which is worth reading. And then there's a detail about the Legal Action Group, which is a national independent charity which campaigns for equal access to justice for all members of society. LAG provides support to the practice of lawyers and advisors such as me, inspires developments in that practice, campaigns for improvements in the law and the administration of justice, and stimulates debate on how services should be delivered. And that's exactly what they do, and I'm very grateful to them for what they do, because they do make it easier for all of us. You can see this book's been through a number of editions since 2014. Do read the preface at the beginning, which sets out what is happening. There are footnotes, of course. You can see the preface has got a little bit and then of detail. Then you've got the detail about the authors themselves, which you can have a look at. Then you've got the contents section. After contents, you've got the table of cases. We've got a lot of cases involved in this area. Then you have the table of statutes. Then after that, you have the table of statutory instruments. And after that, we have some European and international legislation, not very much, but a little bit. Post-Brexit, there's always going to be some, there's always going to be an overlap. Then you have a very useful abbreviations section. Now, I think the abbreviations section is really very important because we all need to know a little bit about some of the abbreviations. There is one that will change. QBD, Queen's Bench Division, is now the King's Bench Division, sadly, with the passing of Her Majesty the Queen. And there will be changes taking place from Queen's Counsel to King's Counsel and so forth. Now, the book starts, and each chapter has a little index of its own to tell you what is actually in it. So the introduction, it sets out how the book is structured in its 4 parts and so forth, and it just runs through that way. And as you can see, the paragraph numbering and the use of footnotes is not as, fortunately, it's not too heavy on the footnoting. Some books that I review, the footnotes really can be quite substantial, but I think the balance is there. So this is what we say, and I've taken some quotes So say Elizabeth and I talked about the quotes about the book. So we start off with a quote and we say, any of us at any time could find ourselves incapable of taking decisions about our health, our welfare, or our finances. And that's an important, rather dry statement to make, because one must confess that the erudite and the convivial authors of this highly regarded legal text are right in making this gloomy yet realistic statement, which certainly pertains to and informs this indisputably indispensable handbook, which deals with virtually every conceivable aspect of court of protection work, noted as the ultimate oversight body over the Mental Capacity Act 2005. I've said in many reviews I've done, I do wish Parliament would come up with a consolidated act and actually review the whole of the working, both the Mental Capacity and the Mental Health Act. It's been a plea on many occasions, not getting very far with it at the moment, but I'm hoping one day we will start having a consolidation when they stop fighting about other less important things, because this is an important area, because a lot of people have mental health issues, and it's a far bigger issue than people would like to admit to. And the fact that the handbook is now out in its 4th edition indicates its youthfulness, its practicality, and certainly its compassionate approach to the subject, and with its towering reputation for being quite indispensable to the vast majority of practitioners in the field. And I would say again, as I say with all these books, you will see these books in the court, and you will know that the judiciary take these books very seriously too, because they're very helpful in trying to simplify what is a really complex area sometimes. In its publishing history, it dates back to 2014, with frequently updated editions published in 2017. The 3rd edition appeared in 2019. It was obviously the last edition released prior to the pandemic, which, in the words of the authors, quote, brought about radical changes to the court practice, as we all know with Zoom, including the notable and largely unanticipated side effect of facilitating easier public access to the workings of the courts as it went online. That's what we would like to think. Actually, it did work very well in many ways. We still have it. We still have a lot of Zoom hearings, but I'm an attended parties man myself. I think it's much better to try and meet the people and find out what is going on. But there are occasions when that doesn't happen. So this then is the handbook now that keeps busy practitioners up to date with developments in what is an especially sensitive area of law. And the point is made, and who would disagree, that the plain-speaking, accessible style of this distinguished text, which is typical of all lag publications, is aimed not only at lawyers, but also to members of the public who, more often than not, are without access to legal help in this area of law, but who nonetheless need to gain an understanding of the issues involved. And of course the Legal Action Group has certainly offered practitioners like myself, and of course general readers, a step-by-step guide through the processes, for example, of making an application to court, as well as the issues involved in representation. And I would say that you do need representation in this area. I'm quite a strong believer that it's good to have professional representation. It speeds things up, and it can clear up a lot of difficulties and misunderstandings. And of course what we're getting here is the means and methods of preparing for and appearing at hearings, and a realistic examination of costs, enforcement and appeals. And again, I think that's very important, because it's an area which certainly you will get advice from a solicitor, but when we're actually in court, it's down to me as counsel to try to bring everything together, and this book of course does help. The book is also distinguished by its ease of use, which I think busy practitioners will appreciate. There's no less than 6 pages of tables of contents, which are precisely detailed and includes, as you've seen, the 69-page overview of the Mental Capacity Act. That's in the shaded area at the back. is also reproduced almost as in its entirety at what is actually an Appendix A, and it's taken out Schedules 5 to 7, but the rest of it is there. It's copiously footnoted, as I've indicated, with numbered paragraphs throughout, so that's relatively easy when you're navigating through the book. The book also, of course, offers multiple tables of cases, statutes and statutory instruments, plus, of course, the usual European international legislation. And then there's the 3-page list of what Elizabeth and I call the pesky abbreviations that often confound readers. And it's useful to have it because I can't remember some of them, and it really is quite useful just to yes, that's what that means, and it's easier then. So let me conclude by saying, suffice to say, every practitioner involved in matters pertaining to the Court of Protection should acquire this useful and up-to-date work of reference. So you'll find it in the courts. Also, note that the accompanying website includes links to relevant statutory materials and a wealth of additional guidance, and it's courtofprotection.com. The date of publication of this new paperback 4th edition is cited as at the 31st of October 2022, so at the time I'm recording this, and the law is stated as at June 2022. So there's been a slight little time lapse between when the law stated and when it actually has appeared. And just to talk about the website again, it's actually courtofprotectionhandbook.com, and there's the details about how to get into it. Just opening the book up in the middle, you can see quite a lot of tables here, remedies and possible relevance that you could be looking for depending on what type of remedy you're going for. And as I say, just looking at chapter 6 on funding and representation, you see the detail they've gone into with the index at the front of that particular chapter. You've got all your questions basically should be answered with this book. So I'm really pleased with it. I'm very grateful to LAG, as I've said earlier and in other reviews. I think many of us are really grateful for the work they do and the help they give us. So a big thank you to all. Bye-bye.